Thanks for tuning in to the RedClinic podcast. I'm Dr. Schwalen, licensed psychologist and expert in the treatment of eating disorders. Today I have a special guest, Melissa Bloom, registered dietitian and also the director of our nutrition department at Next Steps Worldwide. Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Dr. Schwalen.
So today I wanted to include Melissa because I think when we're thinking about the treatment of eating disorders, it is so important to make sure that we're doing things within what's considered best practices. And what we know from evidence, years and years of research, is that people who have eating disorders that want to really and truly recover need to do so with a team of professionals. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times I get calls, or we get calls at the clinic where clients are in recovery from an eating disorder. And they might say things like, well, I just want to work with a therapist. I'm not really looking for a nutritionist or a dietitian. And we have to take the time to explain that we actually take a multidisciplinary approach. And it's really what we know is in their best interest. And so because that conversation happens all the time, I thought it would be awesome to bring you on today to have you share with us just some different things that, people would want to know about what is a dietitian, why is one so important in the treatment of eating disorders, what is really, nutrition, and what does that mean when you're talking to a client about that. And really, for me, it's important because I want to drive home the fact that as a psychologist and expert in the treatment of eating disorders, I actually refuse to do my job unless there's a dietitian on the team. And then that dietitian has to even have expertise in eating disorders. So it's very specialized, and I understand that, and I stand by that wholeheartedly. And so I just thought it would be awesome to dedicate an entire episode to why a registered dietitian with expertise in eating disorders is so important. So what is a registered dietitian?
Well, first of all, Dr. Schwalen, thanks so much for having me on. I am honored to be here. So a registered dietitian is a trained professional who goes through various types of collegiate courses under nutrition and science, and then undergoes a intensive internship supervised by very experienced dietitians. And then a registered dietitian would take a certification exam and a licensure exam specific for that state and be able to practice. Now, a lot of people will think, oh, is a registered dietitian the same as a nutritionist? The answer is no. So a fun fact actually about dietitians is we go by registered dietitian nutritionist as well as registered dietitians. But the term nutritionist actually is not regulated. So anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. However, not everyone can call themselves a registered dietitian. So it is very important to seek treatment involving a registered dietitian versus a self-proclaimed nutritionist.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So a registered dietitian actually goes to school for this.
Yes.
And then they get supervised hours. And then they have to take a test, and then they get some type of certification from a board.
Yep.
That allows them to practice and call themselves a registered dietitian.
Yes.
Okay. One thing I did forget to mention is that we love Melissa. She's funny. She's awesome. She's easy to work with. She brings so much just personality and spunk to our team. And I've really enjoyed working with her and watching her grow nutrition services at Next Steps. It's been really fun to see all that program development happening. So maybe if we have some time at the end, we can talk a little bit about that.
That sounds wonderful.
I would love to hear now why it's important to have, a registered dietitian who has expertise in eating disorders.
Yeah, that's another really great question. Not only do registered dietitians generally have very solid nutrition training, however, eating disorders is really a level up from that. So quite a few providers, whether they're health coaches, again, self-proclaimed nutritionists, or other registered dietitians, may claim that they work with eating disorders, and their intentions may be great. However, that true training is absent. So in eating disorder treatment, because it is so comprehensive medically, psychologically, and nutritionally, you really do have to have a very in-depth understanding of how those components work together. And not only that, usually experience in higher levels of care to know the continuum of different treatment types at different levels of care, so we can direct and help direct what our clients need for eating disorder treatment. Now, the third piece to this is that dietitians who may not provide the expertise for eating disorders could exacerbate or make an eating disorder worse by focusing on weight loss or other disease processes that could be masking an eating disorder. So it's very important.
Okay. So thank you so much for all of that. As you were talking, I was thinking about just different examples of how we've seen that come alive, right? So I'm thinking about different clients that have called in for their own recovery, and they might already have a dietitian that they're working with. And then I hear things like, well, my dietitian, doesn't think I need to be on a certain meal plan, and the one that I'm on is one that I'm comfortable with. What's wrong with that?
It really doesn't challenge the eating disorder. And in that level of comfort with food, it's keeping them from continuing their recovery. So as a registered dietitian, it's extremely important to push that for our clients with food exposures or different kinds of meal plans and understanding what all goes into that to meeting their nutritional needs, but also eating a variety of foods too.
And I want to kind of piggyback that off with making clients feel uncomfortable is probably something we can guarantee, right?
Yes.
I talk to clients about that all the time. So our job is not to keep them, feeling comfortable and so safe that they actually want to come see us all the time, right? Because if we do that, then we're actually not promoting growth or fostering an environment that allows them to truly recover. We do promise that we will never make a client unsafe. We're never going to put them in a situation where they're going to be in danger. That's a guarantee, right? We'll always talk to them about what's in their best interest, but we will find ourselves in situations with our clients that make them uncomfortable.
Yes.
So from your perspective as a registered dietitian who understands eating disorders, how do you deal with that, in session when a client's sitting there talking about things that maybe make them feel uncomfortable or they're trying to avoid going there? How do you handle that?
Well, a lot of our work involves a multidisciplinary approach. So I really work to lean on and coordinate care with our eating disorder specialized therapists and psychologists to help me navigate what is the best route of making this push for nutrition or a healthier relationship with food. Because that multidisciplinary approach really creates this beautiful canvas for us to move forward nutritionally and psychologically working together. So for example, when we're doing food exposures, it may not work for me to say, hey, you need to eat this. The therapist can provide me or other dietitians the way to how to approach that in the best interest of the client so they can feel safe and empowered.
Okay, so you really lean on the team, and I've seen you do that all the time. I even have the example of what just happened yesterday, right? So I was talking to a client and they were sharing the experience of, going to a restaurant that they don't normally go to, ordering a menu item that they're not used to ordering. And the item was actually one that is easily seen as a triggering food for an eating disorder, especially the traditional kinds like anorexia or bulimia. And she was saying things like, I ate past feeling full. I definitely overate. I'm feeling really guilty. I don't know what to do. I was having urges to exercise. And I literally said, hang on a second. And then I came to your office. I came and got you, and I had you join for just a minute because I wanted to be able to establish the premise that this actually just isn't about the food, this is the eating disorder.
Yes.
And so you were able to do that for us because you were able to speak to like, well, actually the meal plan is this and intuitive eating works like this. And so all of those feelings aren't really because you overate. Those feelings are there because you ate a really triggering food.
Yes.
Right. And so I wouldn't have been able to do that without you.
Right. Likewise.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about nutrition.
Okay.
Why can't I just go Google like, the new fad diet and follow that and have all my dreams come true?
Really firing me up with this topic. This is one of my favorite topics. So nutrition is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when we have that kind of depth to something in our society, there's going to be a lot of information the majority of information that is not towards your best interest. And when we take that consideration, we start to question what is actually true with what we're hearing on. I think I heard the phrase Google therapy or Google medical or Google nutrition. Right. No, don't do it. And so when there's such an industry attached to it, it's really important to actually seek out the truth with nutrition. When so many other people are benefiting from your feelings of failure on food or what you don't know, or in fact, to go a little bit more in depth, the feelings about your body and dictating what you should do about nutrition without knowing you as an individual, that is a red flag. It can be extremely damaging. It is part of our dieting culture. So as a registered dietitian, we really know how to sift through that information that isn't really correct or it's taken out of proportion. There is one of my favorite taglines, and I call it a tagline or a headline, was sugar is as addictive as cocaine. That is a headline that is untrue. There are some components to that mechanism, but it's not as addictive as cocaine. That was just there to grab your attention so we can get clicks. So we have to be really careful with our well-being and nutrition information and what we actually choose to listen to and know how to nourish our bodies outside of what our industry, which is fairly corrupt, is telling us to do.
Okay. And I actually spoke about that, I think, last week in the episode when I was speaking on social and psychological factors that contribute to eating disorder development. And I use the example really similar to what you said about how, there's people out there in the industry, marketing to people who have money, and the people who have money are those that are adults usually, and the adults tend to have more access to advertisements and things like that, but so do kids. And so now all of a sudden, we're being played, right, as a society in terms of big industry profiting off of the fact that we're dissatisfied with how we look or don't feel good about just something to do with body image, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you also alluded just a second ago to, sugar and cocaine, like there might be some similar mechanism. You said that, right?
Yes.
What does that mean? And how would you talk to a client about something like that?
Yeah, so that's a great segue into really leaning on what registered dietitians can provide for you as well, is knowing how that hormonal shift with mood in our brain, with our appetite, with different kinds of foods can actually do hormonally to our body. So when we have consumed something that is in highly refined sugars, then typically that will light up portions of our brain, the lovely hormone that you know a lot more about than I do, called dopamine. And it makes us happy. That's why it's great and fun to eat cookies and candies. There's a reason for that. It is not because of your lack of willpower, which our dieting industry gets us to think. So when we have food like that, so different kinds of foods can can affect hormonally how we feel as well. And when we see a tagline like that, we have to be cautious of, is that actually true? To an extent, a very smaller extent, yes, but not to the point of creating this chaos in our brain that is accompanied by addiction.
Okay. So, I mean, you weren't lying when you said nutrition really is a science, because right there you sounded really scientific. You're talking about hormones and mechanisms and dopamine and all of those things. Do you talk about these things with clients in sessions?
Yep. We talk about these things in depth, specifically to a client and the individual perspective. So how that client is interacting with food, providing education around maybe why we're turning to certain foods or lack thereof, is a very important core part of our work, and it's food and mood. So inside of eating disorders and outside of eating disorders as well. So we spend a lot of time working on understanding that portion of nutrition in our sessions together, so you can have some self-compassion towards your food behaviors.
That's so interesting. So you're taking the science, but then you're also applying it individually to the client sitting right in front of you.
Yep.
So that kind of segues into like a meal plan. If I go see a dietitian, right, I think the misconception is they're going to put me on a diet and I'm going to lose weight. And I've learned just from working with dietitians throughout my career is that really a meal plan is your way of writing a prescription based on what is best for that client.
Yes.
So it's not a diet.
Right.
It has everything to do with all this science of that individual person.
Yes.
So what do you want us to know about meal plans?
So if someone hands you a meal plan without getting to know you or is not an expert, don't follow it. Usually people who I see say that, hey, I was given a meal plan by so-and-so, chicken, broccoli, and rice all day, every day. It's a popular one. Oh, and eggs maybe in there too. And they wonder why it becomes really boring and the same thing over and over again. And they start to internalize, like, what's wrong with me? So I just want to segue into what I'm going to talk about with that notion. So a meal plan is really a roadmap. When we're creating nutrition guidance for someone, a meal plan is a roadmap to create structure in their life to support their recovery or to support mental health recovery in general. And if we don't have that structure in our day-to-day with the nutrition to support our being inside and out, then we really can't expect ourselves to improve or progress. So meal planning is not just handing you a sheet of paper and saying, hey, eat this and this quantity and this amount. It's a roadmap to guide you to trust and relearn the process of intuitive eating and how your body actually feels with food. And you're your best own advocate.
Okay, so now I'm thinking of two different questions, right? So obviously I think we need to talk about what is intuitive eating. When is someone with an eating disorder even ready for that? Like, how do you know that? When would you even recommend it? Okay. But the other thing I'm thinking of is if a meal plan isn't instructions, because I even used the word prescription just a second ago, right? So I'm going to call myself out on that. If it's not instructions about like what dose of this nutrition I need at this time of day, then what do you mean? What's a roadmap? Like, what would you actually write on a meal plan?
Yeah. So it really depends upon you and your presentation and the amount of structure that you need. So some clients that I see may need a little bit more structure around their nutrition roadmap when that's involved with meal planning together. And some clients may need a little less structure because structure actually is more triggering or creates more chaos in their brain. So it really depends upon that individualized approach. So knowing what structure, even the word structure, even the word roadmap is so individualized to you that there's not one size fits all. And that is a common misconception with nutrition.
Well, and I'm really glad that you said that, because it's not one size fits all. There is still a real way to take an individualized approach and continue to challenge an eating disorder.
Yes.
And the reason I highlight that is because when we have clients that show up with a registered dietitian on their team already, and they're, and that person doesn't, specialize in eating disorders, the client usually will say, well, we work together. We're taking an individualized approach. Mm-hmm. And what we come to find out is really that dietitian's not challenging the eating disorder.
Yes.
So you're able to do both. You're able to take that individualized approach based on what that client really needs to become healthier, right? And you use that word healthy, I think, really specific to the person.
Yes.
Because what's healthy for me is not the same as what's healthy for you.
Correct.
And then you still challenge the eating disorder. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to provide some examples of how you do that?
Yes. Or? So, for example, if I am guiding someone through, let's say they may need a little bit more structure with meals and snacks, portioning guidance, really understanding what that looks like for them specifically. So we'll work together to really to create and craft something that works for them. But let's say that this particular client may only eat salads for lunch and may only feel comfortable eating salads with balsamic dressing. What I would do, and really pushing the client to increase their food variety and push their eating disorder, is planning out different times to be able to engage in what we call food exposures. So challenging, maybe it doesn't look like challenging the whole salad at first. Maybe it looks like challenging the dressing. Maybe it looks like challenging the different type of protein. Then progressing, maybe it's a side salad with something else, just to increase that variety. But walking alongside of someone in their eating disorder recovery, I can see your question. That's such a fine line with like feeling comfortable and at the same time, so feeling safe, should I say, but at the same time, really pushing them and empowering them that eating something different will be okay. And their body metabolically will understand how to process different nutrients.
Okay. So you take a lot of time, this is what I'm hearing you say, in your relationship with each client. Mm-hmm. You're building trust with that client so they can feel safe as they take the next step and the next step and the next step to recovery. Absolutely. And at the same time, you're helping them build trust with their bodies.
Yes.
Okay. And so I think that goes into what's intuitive eating.
Yeah. So I value the relationship that the provider has with their clients. I think that is an integral part of eating disorder recovery. You have to be able to trust what your providers are saying and hold on tight while we kind of let you go. So leading to your question, intuitive eating, I'm going to summarize this as much as I can.
It's a loaded question, right?
Yeah, because I feel like this could probably be a whole nother separate topic.
And we can do that. We can make episodes on this thing for whatever we want.
Yeah, intuitive eating is a little controversial in some nutrition worlds, but it's also very accepted in different worlds. So intuitive eating in summary is really understanding how to trust your body with food. So understanding how to recognize your hunger and fullness, but that's not it. So when I ask people what intuitive eating is, that's their number one answer. How do I recognize my hunger? How do I recognize my fullness? And that's it. That's all intuitive eating is. No, it's our relationship with food. So understanding that how dieting mentality or food restriction or dieting in general has really contributed to your relationship with food, and looking at food from a more neutral standpoint, free of judgment, so you can observe your behaviors around food and learn. So it takes some guidance. It takes trust. It takes appropriateness in where someone is at in their own recovery, because essentially we're letting go. But when I say that too, people will say, I don't want to eat everything in sight, or I don't know how to trust my body. But when we view it from a space of this non-judgmental approach, then things become so much more relaxed. And when we're relaxed at a meal, we can observe. And when we can observe, we learn. When we learn, we trust. So that's it in summary. I mean, there's many more components to it around body image and movement and honoring our health around intuitive eating too. But that could be a whole separate series.
Well, I think what you just said, and we will definitely do that series here in the near future, but what you just said about, stepping back and being curious and being non-judgmental, really just learning, about maybe how you're feeling or what you're thinking, what's going on with that food, and then coming back to the registered dietitian sessions with you, right? Mm-hmm. And processing all of that.
Yes.
That's part of intuitive eating.
It is.
So you're not doing it all alone.
Correct.
You're building insight and mindfulness around it, but you're doing it with your client side by side. You're really walking with them in that.
Yes.
Okay. And so I think we could go on and on forever, but this was awesome. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you come back soon because we have so much more we need to talk about.
Yes, we do.
All
and
right.
I'd love to.
All right. Well, then we'll see you next time.
Thanks.